Hi everyone, today we are going to interview Omer Hamerman. So, Omer, tell us about yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. As like you introduced me, my name is Omer. I work as a senior architect at ProDops for 5 years now. Most of my work is done on AWS, on which I try to always build automate infrastructure. I build secure pipelines. I also develop my own open source tools. All of them are in the areas of ops and infrastructure. Um, I can say I like simple and elegant solutions for whatever I build, and obviously I try to automate everything I can. Usually my approach is building foolproof systems for the most part, and systems that can handle themselves if something really bad happens, so I don't wake up at night to fix them on myself.
Okay. Okay, so now tell us about PodOps.
Okay, so ProDops, the company which we both work at, we're based at Tel Aviv, London, and Miami. Me, myself, I live in London at the moment. It was established in 2013. You may have known us in our previous name, DevOps Israel. We've completed more than 500 projects to date. Some big and small names. You probably have a list of them. Yeah, so these are some of our clients: Get, Tabula, Twist, PayPal, Spot.im, to name a few. You can see big names and small ones. We've done all the range of possible company sizes in the market. We love everyone.
Good for us. Okay, so let's start with the interview. Alright, ready. First question. What are good key point indicators, KPIs, for choosing a technology for smooth ops and infrastructure? Shoot.
Okay, that's a great question that no one ever asks. People tend to make decisions on kind of weird and strange parameters, which are obvious when you think of them. But if you think more thoroughly, I try to do things the other way, and I'll explain myself. So when people, managers, R&D managers, even developers choose technology, they usually go with what they either know, someone recommended, what they found out on Google. Maybe they had a discount or some free tier on a platform, and those are all great to consider. But I try to usually do a more kind of thorough research, and I try to consult our customers to do the same. I have a kind of a list of basic questions that a manager or anyone choosing a technology can ask themselves. And if you follow those questions, you can probably make a better decision at the end. So a few of those questions would be, first of all, what's my end goal? What's the requirement? What am I
Wait,
trying to
Omer,
do?
so can we consider those questions as KPIs? So if I answer the question, the KPI is answered?
Yes, of course.
All right.
That's the idea.
All right.
Um, so I'd ask myself, what's the goal? What's my requirement? What am I expecting the tool to do? Maybe it's a security tool, maybe it's a deployment platform, maybe it's even a cloud provider. What stage is my team at? Are we a small startup with one developer, or are we a small startup with 10 developers? And that might change the answer. Maybe we're an enterprise, a large enterprise that requires some robust solution. I'd ask myself, what's the skills we already have in-house? If my 1-2 team developer already know some kind of programming language, maybe they're already experienced with a specific platform, maybe that's what we should do or choose. I'd check how the current application is built. If it's not already built, then I'm free. I can do whatever I want. But if we're already deployed with containers, or we're already used to working with serverless platforms, that might be the way to keep on going. I check if I have some constraints or special considerations. Maybe I'm forced, or not forced, but obligated to work with a certain thing and not the other. If I already have a deployed environment, it might be a good thing to leverage the existing stuff instead of just building from scratch. We always love to build stuff from scratch. It's not always the best way to go. And I usually, towards the end, I try to make a list. I don't want to come up with one thing and go towards it. I like to make a list and then choose two candidates that I can make a list of pros and cons, and then understand, you know, analytically which one is better and why, and then make a decision. And the last very important key that people don't usually do is I'd ask myself, who can I consult with? Who can I talk to? I want to get a professional answer to something that's usually not my field of expertise. That's where we come in that area. But people most of the time would just use Google, stuff like that. So I'd advise to always seek for professional advice, even if it costs a little. Usually it won't.
Can you give just one quick, a very, very quick example for, like you said, if the developers are familiar with the language, so I would choose this type of tool. So do you have maybe just one example? Like maybe if developers know TypeScript, Python, or any other language, which tool would you choose? Like which, CI/CD tool aligns with this? Only if you have one in mind.
Specifically for CI/CD, that's more of a general field. But yeah, if I choose, let's say I need some kind of workflows platform, okay, and I know that I have Airflow or Argo CD or just Argo workflows, I'd usually go, especially if I want to extend the platform, maybe write some plugins, maybe integrate with their API, and they provide some kind of SDK. So I would look at first what I know in-house. If my backend is written in TypeScript and I have two solutions, one written in Python and the other is in TypeScript, and I can extend the TypeScript platform with my own code, I'd usually go with that. I don't have concrete examples for that, but that's just something to consider.
I'm just thinking now about, I just thought about, you talked about Py, I just thought about Jenkins and Java, maybe.
For example, that's a good example. If you're working with Jenkins, you have to know Groovy if you want to write code, and you should usually write code. That's a good example. I have other examples, especially in the CI/CD realm, where you don't have to know a specific language because the extension can be done in any language because it's just using containers. So that's another aspect of stuff you can always check.
Yeah, like Pulumi, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken.
So I was talking about Drone specifically. Drone is a platform that's written in Go, but if you want to extend something, which basically means not extending the features of the thing itself, but basically writing your own plugin. So the plugin is just a step in the pipeline. You can write it in whatever language you want because it's just a container. It gets parameters, does something, and then exits. So that's an example for a platform that's very flexible in that term.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So we'll move on to the next question.
Sure.
All right. So how would you recommend to adopt a new service or tool?
Okay, so adapting a new tool, assuming we chose the right one that would take us the long way and help us be scalable, but yet not create too much friction with the tool.
What do you mean by friction? Friction between who?
Between the team and the tool. That's what I mean.
Okay.
When I say friction, I mean unwanted interactions, fixing stuff, learning new stuff, but not in a good way, like learning stuff when the house is burned. That's what I mean. Okay. Trying to fix stuff in the middle of the night where we could have chosen a simpler platform that maybe not everyone uses, but it's much simpler, much easier. And if we don't have the ops resources in-house, we might want to go with another solution. And even if we do, we don't want to keep them busy the entire time with firefighting. That's the right word.
All right.
So that's when I said I like simple and elegant solutions, that's where it comes in. Simpler doesn't mean bad or stupid. It means it works.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Any
demos, any practical examples that you can show us? I don't know. Tell us about.
So the big example I always think about is Kubernetes, which is an awesome platform. It's open source. It's extendable. But at the same time, Kubernetes is hard. It's a steep learning curve. Not everyone know the entire bits and bytes. I mean, most of the people don't know the bits and bytes of Kubernetes, but that's the usual go-to. I mean, I know a small startup right now. It has 1.5 developers. One of them is half-time. And they just went with Kubernetes because that's what the first developer knew in terms of, he knew an automated tool how to deploy a cluster. He doesn't know how to build it correctly or how to securely manage it or et cetera, et cetera. He just knew a tool He had a script, he deployed a Kubernetes cluster, and now they're fighting with managing namespaces and routings and stuff like that, which is great if you need it. But if you don't, there are other alternatives. So do your research. That's what I'm saying.
Can you give an alternative, maybe a cloud provider alternative that provides such service as Kubernetes?
So each one of the cloud providers does have Kubernetes as a solution, Google, Azure, and AWS. But I'm not sure about Azure. I know AWS has ACX, and I know Google has their Cloud Run. And it's not always the better option, but a lot of times it's a better option because it's usually out of the box integrates with all the cloud platform solutions. So you get monitoring, logging, secure pipelines, probably CI/CD to integrate with it. So a lot of times it can save you a lot of headache. Maybe it won't be as full of features and surprises like Kubernetes is, but you'd be far better with a simple platform that you can just deploy to and keep moving, especially if you're working in a small team and you don't have the resources.
Okay, so we'll move on to the third question. How do you avoid failures and run smooth integrations like you mentioned in the start?
Okay, so I made a list here too, stuff that I usually do when I integrate new solutions. So the first and foremost, I try to read the manual. I don't always do that, I can be honest with you, but reading the manual usually saves questions and failures along the way. So when I say read the manual, it's not every little line that you have in the manual. It's basically how to deploy stuff. I like to know the best practice of everything. So if we're talking about a platform, for example, like Kubernetes, I would like to know what's the best practice in terms of networking. Where should the nodes be? Where is the master? Or if I'm using the service, obviously the master is being run for me. So what's the best way to secure a network? How do I manage access control? If I'm deploying something else, like a CI/CD server or an external tool, I'd like to know whether I can use MFA or not, like two-factor authentication. Maybe I can use SSO to delegate the login to a central solution. Maybe I want to install a VPN on top of all of that to only open the access for my developers and try not to make stuff public out there in the world. I like just to know how things can automate themselves and fix themselves if something bad goes, something happens in the middle of the night. If a node crashes or a pod crashes, whether it can fix itself, whether it can deploy a new one in turn. And I'd like to know how the reporting works. If I need to install something.
Just one example, like you were saying, fix themselves. It sounds like a voodoo magic. So what do you mean by fix themselves?
So let's take, for example, something I did lately, a drone agent. Okay. If you hold, agents are really simple. They're basically instances. Doesn't matter if it's a container or an EC2 instance, but it's an instance out there, a server in the cloud. And you can run some kind of script, and there you go. You have an agent. It's connected to the server and it works. But what happens if it fails or dies or someone kills it unintentionally? You want some kind of script to be able to reset a new node and automatically install it and create a new agent. That's just a very simple example. Okay, so if an agent or node dies in the middle of the night, I don't want to wake up and fix it. I want to be able to fix itself. So that's a simple solution to something. Yeah. And the last thing I have on my list is incident response or management. I want to get notifications on anything that happens. There's a term called alert fatigue. I don't want to get tired by the number of alerts I'm getting. But if something really big goes down, for example, a node in Kubernetes dies, and that happens in production in the middle of the night, I want to be notified. Doesn't matter if it's my phone, my Slack, whatever. I want notifications to work. Even if I don't respond at the same second, I want to be able to see that it happened even the next morning, so I can handle it the next day. So it's important to always have visibility of what's going on in the system, always.
So can you give just a tip? You said you don't like the notification fatigue. So like which type of notifications would you set? Failures of what, success of what, failures of what,
Yeah. I don't want to get too detailed and specific because it changes and the context changes. But I usually I work with Slack, which I think most of other people do. And if not, it doesn't matter. I try to create specific channels for specific alerts and make sure those alerts go to their specific channel. So if a channel kind of beeps and shows me there's a new message, I know that something goes on there and I can go in and see the log. And I don't get all of this long log of messages that are unrelated. So I try to separate them in a way. And of course, you have to consider what are you going to notify about and what do you want to keep silent. If it's just a warning or a simple thing, maybe you want to aggregate them into one line and just throw that. There are all kinds of ways to work with that. You also asked me about the deployment. So, I mean, introducing a new system. So the stuff I just mentioned was for a new system. When you already have an existing system or a platform or whatever, an existing tool, and you want to replace it with a new one, especially I'm talking about production environments. So you want to make sure of a few things. First of all, yes, you have to get notified about anything, but you have to do the migration slowly. Lots of times I've seen people introduce a new tool, they just kill the old one, put the new one, and that's it. And then they try to migrate stuff. So I kind of work the other way. I usually use a side-by-side system. I put the new one near the old. I migrate very, very slowly. Like if you're working in a multi-service environment, I'd move one or two and then just wait a week to see how it works and then slowly migrate all of them. And when I'm done, I won't kill the old version. I'll just stop it and keep it there in case something happens over the next couple of weeks or something like that. So it's a very slow and gradual migration. So I never get hurt. And if I do, I can quickly roll back and fix everything. So be very careful when you delete stuff, especially when it comes to delicate resources. But my kind of cycle or rule is deploy, test, scale, and then migrate the traffic.
What do you mean by scale?
So you create the environment, you test that it works. For example, again, a drone agent or a CI/CD agent, whatever. You deploy it, you test that it works. You send some kind of job to make sure it can run the workload. Then you scale it. If you use a production environment, you probably want multiple duplications of everything. So if it's agents, I can scale it to 4, 5, 6, whatever I'm using. And only after it's scaled and it's ready to handle the entire workload, I'll start migrating stuff one by one. That's the idea.
Yeah, it's like you also described, this sounds like you described the load balancing, like how the load balancer would work, how you shift the network traffic from, the old infrastructure to the new infrastructure. So it sounds like...
So again, you have to deploy, test, then scale, and then slowly migrate traffic to. Traffic is another thing you can slowly migrate. It can be gradual, especially with AWS. You can start by moving 10-20% of the traffic to your new load balancer, if that's the case you mentioned. Make sure everything works, test it again, run through the cycle, make sure that everything's fine, you get notified, and only then slowly, gradually migrate the other 10-20% until you reach 100. Don't just move everyone to one place and see that everything works.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so I think we're up for today, Omer. Do you have anything else to add? Maybe, I don't know, some tip for the finish,
It's not a tip, but think of what you're doing a bit more thoroughly. Decisions you make, especially on early times and startups and small teams, they have a really big effect down the road. They usually stuff that you decide on the first couple of weeks will last for years. If we're talking about platforms, big platforms mainly. Migration is not that easy afterwards. So think about that. When you make those decisions, do the research, even though you have a tight schedule and you want to deliver to your first and one and only client. Think about how you're going to scale later and how you're going to handle stuff in the next couple of years, because everything has a big effect on what's going to happen.
Yeah, you won't survive the second fundraising for your startup if you don't scale it right.
Yeah, and maybe you do, and you have to work 2 week nights. I don't know
Yeah,
what kind
to
of
fix
extreme
stuff.
period you're gonna do just for those decisions.
Okay, so
Uh,
to finish it up, now I need you to give me a fake high five, so just put your hand below, and no, put it down, put it down. Yeah, hit it. Bye, my friend. It was nice interviewing you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.